Chapter 18. Drek'tar had been the last to visit the missing family, checking in on Nok'ra after tending to Durotan. Nok'ra, Drek'tar said, had been sullen and embarrassed, as was only to be expected.
"I am sorry, chieftain," the shaman said. "I had no suspicion they would try to leave."
Draka snorted as she helped a still aching Durotan into his armor.
"Of course you didn't. You, like the rest of us, assumed that Nok'ra and Khagra had some sense in their thick skulls. It would seem we gave them greater credit than they deserved."
"Them, Grukak, Delgar, and Kulzak as well," said Orgrim as he entered. 5 adults and 3 children in all. "I say let them go," he growled, though he too was clad in armor and ready to depart with his friend. "They will not catch up with Gul'dan, nor will they likely be able to even follow him. That last snow saw to that. Let them starve to death. Or mayhap they will run across some stray Red Walkers who will do the job more swiftly than hunger."
"You forget, Orgrim," snapped Durotan, fastening Sever to his back. "They have taken children.
I will not allow them to die because their parents are foolish. These are Frostwolf children, the future of our clan, and they are in danger. Our duty to them is clear." "What of their parents?"
Durotan hesitated. He was furious at Nok'ra's stubbornness. His decision, and that of the others who had accompanied him, had not only put the children at risk, it had necessitated that a whole party be sent to hunt them, instead of food. For a brief moment, he regretted his decision to spare Nok'ra, but he pushed that thought aside as quickly as it had come.
"I will decide what to do with them when we find them. I will do nothing to jeopardize the clan."
Perhaps a night spent alone at the mercy of the elements might have changed Nok'ra's demeanor. A clanking sound drew his attention from his dark thoughts, and he looked up to see Draka reaching for her own armor.
"Wife,"
Durotan stated.
"You will stay behind."
She paused and arched an eyebrow. "Husband," she replied, "I will ride with you, as I have always done."
"You are with child, my heart,"
he said, rising and laying a gentle hand on her belly. It was only slightly softer, as the child was still new.
"And one of the reasons we ride is to recover these precious little ones. If we do not find them, our child will be one of a mere handful. No one else is carrying one."
Her expression could have withered the strongest tree.
"In years past," she said, "I was deemed too frail to be a true Frostwolf. That time is over. I go where you go, whatever happens."
There was no arguing with her, and Durotan found he did not want to. Their place was at one another's side. That was part of the legacy he would bequeath to his child, be it male or female.
"Whatever happens,"
he agreed. He turned to Orgrim.
"I will need you to stay behind," he said, "in case we do not return. There will be tension here. The clan will need a strong leader."
Orgrim grunted unhappily.
"I will serve my chieftain better by smacking the upstarts soundly," he said, "but I will obey."
"Keep your armor on," Durotan said,
"just in case."
He did not need to spell it out. The Frostwolf Clan had been rocked by this event as never before. Durotan had never expected a challenge from one of his own, but it had come. Orgrim should be prepared in case things grew ugly. Orgrim nodded, all humor gone.
"Lok'tar,"
he said.
"Lok'tar,"
Durotan said, and went to the waiting Sharptooth. Durotan and Draka rode side by side, surrounded by their hunting party. Sharptooth and Ice loped at a mile-eating but steady pace that allowed the couple breath enough to speak.
"I should have been better prepared for such a challenge,"
Durotan said.
"Gul'dan's words would be intoxicating to the fearful, and Nok'ra has a family to care for. And he has ever been impulsive. A few words from his wife or friend might have led him to believe that somehow this," and he indicated the harsh terrain before them, "was the best option."
"You have a kinder heart than me," Draka said. "I have faced this terrain alone. I know how unforgiving it is." She looked up at him. "I know how hard it is on the young. My anger at Nok'ra is less than he left, than that he took his children with them."
"He and the..."
Durotan frowned. What should he call them? Frostwolves? They had scorned the title. Rebels? After the Mak'gora, they had not offered violence. Traitors? He shook his head. There was no precise word in the Orcish tongue for what Nok'ra and his group were. The deserters, he said, unhappy with the word, but knowing no better one, will not elude us for long. If Gul'dan's trail is hard to find, I think only the trail of a wounded cleft-hoofed bull would be easier to follow than theirs. Draka threw back her head and laughed. Durotan grinned, warmed by the sound. He had not exaggerated. The group had taken 5 wolves with them. It was clear that Nok'ra was trying to catch up with Gul'dan. The tracks led almost directly south. The hunting party was 5 strong. Alongside Durotan and Draka were Gurlak the singer, and Kruglar and Melak, both experienced trackers. Ice, Sharptooth, and the other wolves ran amiably, ears forward, tongues lolling. Durotan envied them their innocence. They ran not in pursuit of those who had betrayed them, but to join with their fellow pack members, both lupine and orcish. What would he do with them? Durotan wondered. The children would have to come back, of course. Their chances of survival were higher with the protection of the full clan, and the children must survive. But Nok'ra and the other adults? Nok'ra had now challenged Durotan's authority twice, first with the Mak'gora, and now by absconding like a thief in the night with the most precious things the Frostwolves had. Even now, Durotan did not wish to kill the foolish orc, but he saw no way out of it. Sharptooth halted abruptly, and Durotan found himself having to grab his wolf friend's thick scruff to stay atop him. Sharptooth's body tensed, and he crouched, his ears flattening against his skull. A low, dangerous growl emanated from him. All the wolves were behaving in a similar manner. Durotan signaled to the rest of the hunting party to emulate him as he drew Sever. He sniffed the air. He scented nothing that signaled danger. While an orc's sense of smell was keen, it was feeble compared to that of a wolf. Durotan trusted his friend. He could not smell what the wolves did, but he realized he scented enough. The beast's musky tension and his party's own sweat. Something very bad lay ahead. Initially, the trail appeared no different here from what they had seen before. The carelessly paw-trampled snow led on for a while before being swallowed up by a thick cluster of pines. The rest of the party awaited their chieftain's orders. Durotan silently dismounted, and the others followed suit. He pointed at the trail ahead of them, and held up 2 fingers. He then pointed to the wolves and, keeping his hand palm down, swept it in front of him. The orcs would proceed 2 by 2, and the wolves were to be released. Unlike the orcs Durotan was tracking, Frostwolves would never desert their pack, and in the closeness of the forest, if it came to a fight, they would fare best unhindered by riders. The group moved forward, taking care not to disturb the snow-laden boughs, a lifetime of practice rendering them able to maneuver almost soundlessly through the snow. The forest was still as they entered. There was no sound of bird calls or the rustling of small creatures going about their business. The tracks revealed that the deserters too had dismounted, walking alongside their wolves. There were no prints of small children's boots, so Durotan assumed the parents had permitted the children to ride. He looked ahead along the path, noting that it bent to the right. The wind shifted. Durotan gasped. He could smell it now, the reek of blood from both orc and wolf. It was not fresh. Whatever had happened had occurred hours ago. He looked back at his companions and pointed left and right, indicating that they were to separate and close in on the site of the battle from different directions. They nodded and obeyed. Durotan did not know what to expect. Bodies, almost certainly, of both wolf and orc. But what, or who, had killed them? He could glimpse the site now, through the tall, dark shapes of the pine trees, a clearing spattered with blood, both red and reddish-black. But, asked Draka, no, it's a bit distant. Where are the bodies? Asked Draka, who was a slight distance away from him. The wolves had come forward, sniffing at the partially frozen puddles of snow. Ice lifted his muzzle to the sky and began to mourn his fallen packmate. The others joined in. Convinced now that there was no immediate threat, Durotan lowered his axe. The rest of the party drew closer, also lowering their weapons. The entire area had been churned up, snow and pine needles alike, drenched in a veritable lake of red blood. As Durotan approached, he saw a wide, bloody trail continue through the woods. Something must have slain all 5 wolves and dragged them off. There was too much blood, and besides, the wolves would never flee if their riders were in peril. Durotan could think of only one predator that could, or would, do that. They had not left the Red Walkers behind with Frostfire Ridge, after all. Durotan stepped closer to the wide red trail. He could now see that boot prints led away from it. He followed the prints with his eyes as they disappeared into the shadowy darkness of the forest. The wolves were already bounding in that direction, whimpering and growling. Draka sprinted off with them, taking care not to disturb the tracks.
"There's too much orc blood,"
Gul'dan pointed out.
"Someone died here."
Durotan looked at the black-red snow and realized that the Loch Vadnod singer was right. He had assumed naively that a member of Nokra's group had been injured, but another mournful howl rent the air, this one sharper, more heartfelt with the rawness of grief. "Durotan!" called Draka. Her voice, barely audible over the Frostwolf's own Loch Vadnod, was sharp and laced with something he had never heard in it before. Fear. The rest of the group raced to her. They found her and their mounts in a small clearing. The wolves had their muzzles raised to the sky. Draka stared, transfixed, at the carnage before her. The 5 wolves had been skinned and butchered. Only carcasses remained. That Durotan had half expected. Their pelts would provide clothing for an orc, and their flesh would feed them. Even the Frostwolves worked the skins of their wolf brothers, so that the wolves would be remembered and still serve the clan even in death. While he would have ached at the sight of their slaughter, that was not what had him, and the others, rooted with shock. Orc life was often brutal. Death was no stranger. Durotan had witnessed fellow clan members, some close friends, trampled beneath raging cleft hooves. He had watched them bleed out after being gored by the horns of talbuks. He had even witnessed death in battle and shocking and violent accidents. But this... Before them lay a body. No, he thought wildly. That wasn't even right. What was left of a body? It was naked. The murderers had taken all of this orc's clothing and supplies, and more. His flesh had been carved from his bones, as the flesh of the wolves had been. His entrails had been scooped out and laid to one side. With a peculiar clarity in the midst of his shock, Durotan noticed that a few organs were missing. The orc lay face down in the snow and pine needles. Swallowing his gorge, Durotan extended sever. He could not bear to touch the blood-slicked bones. Prodding gently, he rolled the corpse over. Nokra's face stared up sightlessly at him. "I knew they adorned themselves with orc and Draenor blood," Draka said softly. "But this..."
They cut him up like..."
Gul'dan couldn't finish the sentence. He swallowed hard and said,
"Was this a trophy?"
Durotan looked from the wolf to the orc and shook his head. "No," he said grimly. "Food."